Pelican Bay State Prison sits near the Oregon border, far from major cities, surrounded by forests and fog. It opens in 1989 with a clear purpose. It is designed to control. At the center of that design is the Security Housing Unit. The SHU is built for long-term isolation. Concrete cells. Solid steel doors. No windows to the outside world. No group activity. No physical human contact. In this environment, Cell 121 becomes known not for violence, but for collapse. The case does not begin with a single dramatic incident. It unfolds slowly. It follows a familiar pattern seen in isolation units across the United States. An inmate is assigned to the SHU under administrative or disciplinary status. The placement is indefinite. Reviews are infrequent. Release depends on complex validation processes tied to alleged gang affiliation or behavioral assessments. The cell measures roughly 8 by 10 feet. The bed is concrete. The toilet and sink are stainless steel. The lights are artificial and controlled from outside the cell. Sound carries poorly, then echoes. Time loses structure. Days blend into each other. The inmate in Cell 121 spends between 22 and 24 hours a day alone. Exercise, when permitted, occurs in a concrete yard enclosed by high walls. The sky is visible only through a narrow opening. There is no shared recreation. No group programming. No touch. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because what happens next reveals how this system truly works. At first, behavior appears stable. Staff logs note compliance. Meals are taken. Orders are followed. Medical checks are routine and brief. Mental health evaluations are limited by the conditions of confinement. Interaction lasts minutes. Sometimes seconds. Over time, small changes appear. Officers note shouting at irregular hours. The words are not directed at anyone. The speech is disorganized. Sometimes it stops entirely. Days pass without verbal response. Periods of extreme silence follow. The inmate does not approach the door. Does not respond to count with the usual signals. Food trays are left untouched. Hygiene declines. Hair grows long. Nails break and split. The cell begins to smell. These observations are recorded. They are not ignored. But they are normalized. In the SHU, unusual behavior is common. Isolation produces predictable effects. Staff are trained to manage security, not to reverse psychological damage. Medical staff document symptoms consistent with severe mental deterioration. Hallucinations are reported. Paranoia increases. Emotional regulation collapses. The inmate appears disconnected from surroundings. Communication becomes fragmented, then nearly impossible. There is no physical abuse documented in the case of Cell 121. No assault by staff. No use of force that stands out from routine procedure. The damage occurs through absence. Absence of social contact. Absence of stimulation. Absence of meaningful intervention. Pelican Bay's SHU operates under policies that emphasize control and prevention. The unit is designed to isolate individuals considered dangerous or disruptive. The criteria for placement are broad. Release pathways are narrow. Mental health services exist within the prison, but access is constrained. Clinicians conduct rounds through cell doors. Conversations are limited by security protocols. Treatment options are restricted by the environment. Medication is often the primary response. In Cell 121, medication adjustments are noted. Compliance becomes inconsistent. At times, the inmate refuses treatment. At other times, the inmate appears unable to understand instructions. Requests for higher-level care are discussed. Transfers are considered. Action is slow. Isolation continues. Veteran officers begin to talk among themselves. They have seen difficult cases before. They have seen anger. They have seen manipulation. What they observe here is different. There is no clear intent. No goal. The behavior does not align with rule violations or strategic resistance. Cell 121 becomes a reference point. Not officially. Informally. A warning. Guards report that basic commands no longer register. Eye contact is absent or vacant. The inmate may stand motionless for long periods. At other times, pacing becomes frantic and repetitive. Sleep patterns disappear. This is not sudden psychosis. It is gradual unraveling. The SHU environment removes normal markers of time and identity. There are no conversations to anchor reality. No physical feedback from others. The brain begins to fill the void. Sensory deprivation alters perception. Thoughts loop inward. Research on solitary confinement has documented these effects for decades. Anxiety, depression, cognitive impairment, hallucinations. In severe cases, permanent damage. These findings are known within correctional systems. Policies change slowly. At Pelican Bay, the architecture itself enforces isolation. Doors do not open unless commanded. Voices are muffled. Movement is controlled. The design leaves little room for adjustment. In Cell 121, the deterioration reaches a point where staff struggle to document behavior. Reports become repetitive. Inmate unresponsive. Inmate incoherent. Inmate refuses food. The language reflects uncertainty. Medical evaluations indicate that the inmate can no longer engage in meaningful assessment. Questions are unanswered or misunderstood. Symptoms persist across weeks and months. There is discussion of whether the inmate is malingering. This question appears in many SHU cases. Isolation produces behaviors that resemble manipulation. Distinguishing between illness and strategy becomes difficult in a setting built on suspicion. But the pattern continues regardless of interpretation. Eventually, the inmate requires constant monitoring. Self-neglect becomes severe. Basic survival behaviors deteriorate. Intervention increases, but remains constrained by policy and resources. The case does not result in a public incident. There is no press release. No internal report labeled as failure. The prison continues operating. But Cell 121 does not fade from memory inside the institution. Attorneys working on isolation-related litigation reference the case. It appears in filings and expert reports. Not by name. By description. By pattern. It becomes evidence in arguments that long-term solitary confinement causes serious mental harm. Former staff mention it in depositions. Carefully. Professionally. They describe it as a turning point. A moment when the damage becomes undeniable. Pelican Bay is already under scrutiny. Lawsuits challenge its use of indefinite isolation. Hunger strikes draw attention to SHU conditions. Medical experts testify about psychological injury. Cell 121 fits into this broader context. It is not unique. It is illustrative. The inmate's identity remains protected. Records are sealed. Privacy laws apply. What remains is the documentation. Logs. Medical notes. Staff observations. They show a progression from functioning to collapse without physical violence. Correctional officials maintain that policies are lawful. That isolation is necessary for safety. That reforms are underway. Some changes occur over time. Step-down programs expand. Review processes adjust. But the legacy of cases like Cell 121 persists. For officers who witness it, the experience reshapes their understanding of the job. Security remains the priority. But the human cost becomes harder to dismiss. For policymakers, the case adds weight to empirical data. It provides real-world confirmation of research findings. Isolation is not neutral. It alters the mind. For the public, the story is largely unknown. It lacks spectacle. It lacks names and images. It unfolds behind concrete walls. Yet it represents a central question in the American prison system. How much control is too much? Where safety ends and harm begins. Pelican Bay continues to operate. The SHU remains part of its structure, though its use evolves. Legal pressure forces modifications. Oversight increases. But the conditions that produced Cell 121 are not confined to one prison. Similar units exist nationwide. The same architectural principles. The same policies. The mental breakdown associated with Cell 121 is not an anomaly. It is an outcome consistent with prolonged isolation. This is why the case circulates quietly. Among staff. Among attorneys. Among experts. As a cautionary example, there is no official acknowledgement of error. No admission of responsibility. The system absorbs the incident and moves on. The inmate's condition, once severely deteriorated, does not fully reverse. Long-term psychological harm does not resolve quickly, if at all. This is noted in medical literature and expert testimony. The story of Cell 121 does not end with reform or resolution. It ends with documentation. A cell number. A set of logs. A body of evidence. It demonstrates that damage does not require brutality. It requires only time, isolation, and neglect. Pelican Bay's SHU was built to contain the most difficult inmates. In doing so, it reveals the limits of containment as a solution. Cell 121 becomes a symbol without being labeled as such. A quiet warning embedded in legal records. It shows that the mind, deprived of contact and stimulation, does not remain intact. The prison system continues to debate how to balance security and humanity. Cases like this inform that debate, even when they are not spoken aloud. The walls of Cell 121 still stand. The lessons they hold remain contested. The breakdown that occurred there cannot be undone. It can only be understood. And understanding arrives slowly in institutions designed to resist change. If you think the story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.